Welcome to the IpX True North podcast, where we connect people, processes, and tools. I'm your host, Chris Anderson. Today we're going to be talking about the costs of corrective actions and what it might look like in your organization. We have Michael Benning, the Executive Director of True North Enterprise Calibration, and Ken Black, the Chief of IpX Workforce Academy with us. Ken, I would love for you to just share a little bit about what you do with IpX and even about your backstory, if you would.
Oh, whoa. Well, so I've been associated with IpX since before it was IpX, when it was the Institute of Configuration Management. Actually working with Vince Guest at the very beginning. We kind of put this thing together as a team, and it's progressed dramatically in the 30 plus years that we've been doing this. My role at IpX today is the chief of the IpX Workforce Academy. In that role, my main objective, my main deliverables is course materials. Working on making improvements or enhancements to existing courses, as well as laying out the roadmap and generating new training materials for new subjects and topics that we haven't talked about before that go beyond traditional configuration management. So to me, that's the really exciting part. I mean, I love teaching. I've been teaching CM2 since it was birthed. It is a passion. But I got to tell you, getting into the course development has really been exciting for me, and that's kind of where I am right now, actually working on new courses. So
awesome, that's cool. That's really neat. Just kind of being able to kind of brainstorm ideas for courses and then have them be built and get them out there is probably a neat experience.
Oh yeah, it's really kind of neat. I mean, I did a course I just completed not too long ago, a course on cybersecurity. I didn't know anything about cybersecurity, but when you start digging into it, you start doing the research and you start finding all this stuff. It's like, man, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I thought that course came out really, really well. So
that's awesome,
and that's happened a couple of times on the new materials.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Michael, I would love to transition over to you and kind of what you do with IpX for those who don't know.
So I've got about 25 plus years out there in industry, and I'm predominantly on the client side with IpX. And when I'm not interacting with clients, I'm learning as much as I can from Ken.
That's awesome. And so, yeah, we're all going to learn a lot from Ken probably today. We're going to be talking about just that cost of corrective action. And I guess to get us on the right foot for those who might not know, Ken, what is your definition, or what's the definition of what corrective action is?
Oh, that's really a great question, Chris, because I'll bet you if you talk to 10 different people, you would get 10 different answers. And the reason for that, I believe that the reason there's so many different opinions about what corrective action is, it's based on what does the organization measure in terms of waste, right? Corrective action it generates waste, or it eliminates the generation of waste, but the elimination of the generation of waste increases the cost of whatever it is the organization is doing. And those are pretty typical things to be measured as corrective action. What is our scrap rate, right? How much rework do we do? And those kinds of things, excess warranty claims or customer complaints, or in some industries, we have CAPAs, like corrective action, preventive action. And those are the kind of things that are tangible, that are easy to get your arms around and measure. And when that's what the organization is doing, that's their definition. What's corrective action? It's what we're spending on this batch of things that I just mentioned. Unfortunately, most organizations underestimate what's actually being spent on corrective action. So much of corrective action is, I want to say, hidden. And what I mean by hidden is it's not recognized as corrective action, right? If if Michael is looking for a document and he goes to the place where the document is supposed to be and it's not there, well, he's immediately thrown into corrective action, right? It's not measured, but he is spending his time and energy now trying to find that missing or misplaced document. So he'll go find out, well, who's the last person that checked it out? And he'll go do research and find out who that was, and he'll go talk to that person, right? So now two people are involved in this discussion about the document that cannot be found. And that person says, well, I'm sure I put it right back where it was supposed to be. So the two of them go, and it just grows. And, anytime, and you see this in our course materials, any time that's being spent in a state of uncertainty, where people are having to ask questions for clarity, or they're having to make guesses because the information being provided is open to interpretation, that's all corrective action. But how does an organization measure that? And the answer is they don't. Most organizations don't measure it. So I know that's a lot of words to answer the question of what is it. Again, I think it's much more than what most organizations actually think. If you were to approach a senior leader in probably any major company and tell them, I'd like to take a few minutes and talk to you about corrective action. Well, immediately in their mind, they know what you want to talk about. You want to talk about scrap loss. You want to talk about waste. You want to talk about rework, those tangible things. In CM2, we don't talk corrective action as much as we talk about intervention resource expenditure. Intervention resource expenditure is way more than traditional corrective action. That's the big difference.
Gotcha. So within these organizations, and Michael, I'll let you add to it or start off this question. So in many organizations, they could have corrective actions going on, but not recognize it because it's kind of tied into their everyday, like what they're used to is that. So how can you talk, Michael, to the culture of kind of the firefighting within these organizations?
Yeah. So maybe first, Chris, maybe I just want to pick up on something that Ken talked about. He characterized it as waste, and yes, I might just go a step further and, for lean experts out there, right? This is classic overprocessing, right? It is not only waste, but it's the worst form of waste, right? It's got all of the other categories of waste sort of built in. So it's bad. I think picking up, going back to your question, I think Ken mentioned measurement, and what are we measuring and how do you measure corrective action? And I think that is, for me, one of the first telltale signs of a culture of corrective action in the organization and the culture of many of the clients that we work with. When clients aren't measuring that or even attempting to measure that or process performance, I think that is a clear indicator of a culture of corrective action.
Yeah, that's the stick your head in the sand approach, right? If I can't see it, then it's not real.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I'm sure that within these organizations, within business, there are other definitions, terms for corrective action. I know you kind of hit on some earlier. Are there some other main ones that people might have heard that is still pertaining to corrective action, but is just a different name?
Yeah, for me, I would call it the opposite of operational excellence. That's a good term for it.
Yeah, that is true. And all those big business initiatives that are going around, Six Sigma, Lean, first time quality. I mean, you can come up with all the names of these different things. They're all focused on one thing. That's the elimination of waste. That's to get your costs down to the minimum that would provide the quality output that your organization is looking for. And all of that waste, however you want to categorize it, whatever you want to call it, It falls into what we call intervention resource expenditure. Intervention resource expenditure can be measured in a lot of different ways. In how many equivalent heads of energy are we spending? How much equivalent dollars are we spending? We actually have a workshop in one of our classes where we let the students develop a scenario within their own work environment where they identify areas that they know are, as we call them, intervention resource expenditures. And then we let them make that list, quantify it, turn it into a percentage of energy on a weekly basis. And then we throw some factors in there for a company of a certain size with a certain salary average, and let them calculate what that company would be losing on an annual basis just on intervention resource expenditure. So this is not something that we give them. We don't give them the how much energy are you spending, what's the percentage. They're developing it themselves. And the results, Chris, the results of that workshop, every single time we do it, people are absolutely blown away. Absolutely blown away.
I can imagine, because you're creating a different viewpoint on it. And so with it, because you hear all the time that leaders, people who are over the organization, celebrating or giving accolades to people who kind of these firefighters that in the putting out all these different things, because wow, you saved us that. Hey, you got that done. Good job. But with what program you're implementing there, those workshops, that's showing them that they need to change those behaviors, change that culture to drive it, to do it right the first time. So how can it's that going out with leadership in organizations?
Absolutely. It's actually showing what Michael was just talking about, the opposite of organizational excellence. It's pretty mind blowing. You're talking about the firefighting and organizations living in that environment. Firefighting, and this is what I tell every organization I've ever worked with, firefighting is not a problem. Firefighting is a symptom of a lot of other problems, right? And we firefight when something didn't go as expected. Something went wrong. So we're either over budget, we're behind schedule, we haven't met the quality level, something is in need of repair, in need of fix. And when we have to go fix something, automatically it becomes hot. So when we talk about what are the symptoms for an organization, how do you know if an organization is in corrective action mode? Well, there's a lot of things you can look at. One being, well, we just talked about, what's your scrap rate? Another one is, how much stuff do you have to do over again? Your failure to achieve first pass success is an indication that something is wrong. Everybody talks about consistent conformance, and there's all kinds of initiatives out there to tell you you need to go get consistent conformance, but nobody tells you what that means. They tell you that it means you get it right, not just the first time, but every time, right? But in order to achieve consistent conformance, there's only one possible way to do that, and that's to define your processes in such a way that when the processes are followed, the result has no choice but to conform. So what you have then is you have predictable process output.
Gotcha.
If you have any variability caused by all these things that we're talking about, the predictability of the process erodes. And once that happens, as process predictability goes down, intervention resource expenditure goes up.
Hey, but guys, I want to go back, if I can, just 1 second. We talked about, Ken's right. We talk about the things that we can measure, but there's some really important and impactful things that we can't measure, or at least extremely difficult to measure. And I'm talking about, and these are really impactful. I'm talking about things like opportunity cost. What gets deferred? Typically, it's those product and process innovation ideas and improvement ideas that get deferred because we're too busy firefighting. I would submit those are much more impactful things. what about the impact to culture that this insidious sort of corrective action becomes how we work, right? That is a cancer in the culture.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, Michael, I'm going to play right off of what you just mentioned. The impact of corrective action is terribly underestimated. Something goes wrong and we have to throw resources at it to go fix it. Or firefighting. So we put a tiger team together. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens then is work that has to be done over again is not work that was planned, right? So when we do our resource planning, we do our output scheduling, we're doing it all based on the premise of first pass yield, first pass success. When it doesn't turn out that way, and we have to take that work back to the work center to do it over again, to Michael's point, that work center has moved on. They're working on their next whatever it is. But now here comes this redo. And of course, because it's a redo, it's hot. It's on priority. So the work that the work center should be working on today gets pushed off to the side so they can address this hot rework or redo. Well, by the time they finish that one, the work that they should have been working on is now late. So it's hot and it's insidious. I mean, it just grows, and it's all unplanned. We don't set our resource plans. We don't set our schedules on failure. We do it based on success. And when failure is the result instead of success, it's tumultuous. It creates turmoil.
So with that, so we have all these corrective actions that are having to take place in a lot of organizations. And when I was with a previous organization in the automobile manufacturing sector, man, scraps, rebuilds, all that, and I'm like, every second is like millions of dollars, and I'm like, wow. So what initial steps can organizations do to begin to reduce these corrective actions?
Well, boy, you know what? And Michael, you really made a great comment a little while ago that when an organization has been in the corrective action mode for a very long time, it becomes the normal way of working, and people don't see it as a problem; they see it as normal business, right? A great story. I was working with a company several years ago that while I was on site, they received an award from one of their customers. And they were so proud, man. They were just prancing around with that award. And what the award was, it was a congratulatory plaque for this company's ability to react quickly to problems. And they came and showed me the plaque, and they were all, just super jazzed. And I said, guys, that's really a backhanded compliment, right? Congratulations on being good at solving the problems that you create. How about a plaque that says, congratulations, I'm not creating any problems? And I guess they were a little upset that I had that perspective on it, but that's what I'm talking about, right? When the behavior is so normalized that it's expected behavior, then we have a serious problem, because now corrective action isn't seen as corrective action. It's just simply seen as, oh, we got some more priority work. If you want to look at symptoms for corrective action, I'll tell you some symptoms. Organizations that have a high percentage of their workload running on priority, that's a symptom. Organizations that have a high usage of deviations and waivers, that's a symptom. Organizations that have a high volume of corrective action changes, those are all symptoms. Organizations that typically can't get their normal work done in a normal work day, right? Those are all symptoms of organizations that have underlying deep-rooted problems that are part of what we call intervention resource expenditure. But again, and Michael just nailed it, if the organization is accepting operating in that mode as standard business practice, then it's like Alcoholics Anonymous. If you don't admit that you have the problem, then you're not going to get it solved.
Absolutely. And so I know IpX uses a control framework called CM2, and you had alluded and mentioned it previously. And those principles, could implementing some of those help reduce corrective action?
Oh yeah, big time. Michael, you want to grab that one first?
Sure, Ken. Yeah, following you is a little bit challenging, so maybe I should first. I think for me, of course, the answer is yes. And I think, Ken said something that, is worth repeating. And I think, these corrective actions, these are, a process failure, right? I mean, it's important to remember a well-defined process that's well executed works every time, right?
Yep.
So, that's where it begins, is understanding, measuring, and then understanding, finding a root cause, and then correcting those things within the process, ensuring that people are following it and measuring that conformance to process. Those incremental steps forward will eliminate corrective action.
Yeah, and with the beautiful thing about the CM2, Chris, is it starts at the beginning. I know that sounds kind of odd, right? You start at the beginning. Well, of course you do. Well, when you're talking about configuration management, starting at the beginning means going all the way back to the drivers, the source of the initial requirements. And the highest level set of requirements that an organization has to adhere to or meet are externally generated to the company. They come from market demands, they come from customer contracts, they come from regulatory agencies, but all of these requirements have to be brought into the company, brought into the organization, and addressed. So with CM2, we start at the very beginning with our 8-step development process. And with that process, step number 1 is to understand and make sure that they are clear, concise, and valid, all those external requirements, so when we generate our highest level internal requirement data sets, that they properly represent what those external requirements are. There's a great indication an organization can look at to decide how good are we at translating and interpreting those external requirements. And that is, do we ever make a delivery to the customer where the customer says, well, that's not what I wanted, or that's not what I ordered, or that's not what I expected? When you hear those comments, that tells you that our ability to interpret and translate those external requirements and successfully capture them in our internal data sets is broken. And that's where it starts. Once that happens, you imagine the customer says, that's not what I wanted. What happens to the organization? Chaos, right? We're right back into that massive corrective action, because now we have to go fix whatever it is that did not come out right. So you want to eliminate or reduce corrective action, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to start with the first step of development. And we need to refocus what is the goal of our development process. And in CM2, we know that for us, the output from development are data sets that will support all of the life cycle phases of the deliverable. And those data sets are clear, concise, and valid. Can't be misinterpreted. There's no translations or interpretations that are going to be required. And to Michael's point, if followed, the process is going to give you exactly what it should be giving you. Now, there's a lot of other things that we talk about, but probably two of them, I think, my favorite and biggest elements that would help an organization is establishing proper ownership. of all the data sets. Every document that an organization has should have assigned owners. It should have an assigned creator and one or more designated users. And they're the ones who are accountable. Boy, now there's a word for you, Chris, accountable. Now, one of the things that I see and have seen for quite some time now in industry is the lack of individual accountability. If you want an organization to really become world-class, you want them to really become good, you've got to get that feeling of ownership. That's how you get accountability. You give people a feeling of ownership. What better way to give people a feeling of ownership than to give them a designation as either an assigned creator or a designated user, and then make them understand you are accountable for the quality of this information set. And then the other thing I think that would be really cool for an organization if they don't have one is to put in a fast track change process. One of the things that cause organizations to stay in the corrective action mode, even when they recognize they have an issue, is the difficulty in making changes. If the change process is clunky, it's bureaucratic, it's hard, it's painful, then there's no incentive for anybody to go fix the things that we know need to be fixed. It's a turnoff. I worked with a company a while back. They actually asked me to come join a workshop that they were conducting, and they had put a cross-functional team together, and their goal was to fix their change process. And they asked me to come in, not to be a team member, just to be in your role, right? Just to keep them from going off into the weeds, bring them back on track. One of the first things they did the first morning was they decided to come up with a charter. What is the charter of this team? Why? Why are we here? What is our goal? And I was so pleased. I have to tell you that they were CM2 grads, most of them on the team. But what was really cool, Chris, their charter was to turn their company's change process into a competitive advantage.
That's
That's
awesome.
their written charter. I loved it. I loved it.
And you mentioned so they were, a lot of them were CM2 grads. So it sounds like, and Mike, I'll ask you first on this. It sounds like the IpX can really help organizations kickstart their reduced corrective action initiative, right? Would you say that's plausible?
Yeah, for sure. I think, I want to go back to something Ken said. He talked a little bit about ownership, and I think, I think the number one area that I see working with clients where they struggle is at the interfaces, right? The functional interfaces, the business interfaces, and ownership is key. And having that ownership from end to end, and I think that is one of the real strengths of the CM2 control framework, is that it addresses that not only from a process perspective, but from an organizational perspective as well. And Ken talked a little bit about creators and users, and that's obviously a big part of it. Okay.
So I think go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I was going to say that, that interface that Michael was talking about, there's an exercise that I conduct when I do classes, course 4 in particular, where we're talking about the change process. And one of the key things to a successful change process is the ability to conduct an enterprise change assessment. And so when Michael talks about interfaces between the product side of the business and the business side of the business, that is really, really a soft spot in most organizations. When we talk about, I'll give you a very simple example. When we talk about making a change to a physical item in manufacturing, most organizations, when they do a technical review, is what most of them call it, it's simply to look at the technical impact of the change, right? So this little exercise that I run in the class is, imagine in manufacturing, we have 2 pieces of metal that are bolted together, and there's 4 bolts 4 bolts and nuts and washers that put these 2 pieces together. And somebody in manufacturing says, well, you know what? Why are we doing that? Why don't we just weld these things together? So they submit a change request to change the process from bolting these things together to welding them. The little exercise that I run in my class is I ask the class, all right, let's go up to the whiteboard. Let's make a list. Every area of the business that could be impacted by this change. And what you find out, oh my gosh, Chris, I mean, I think the biggest list I didn't come up with, but the biggest list that came out of the class, like 32 different impacts. And everything from, well, you know what? What if we've never welded before? That means we don't have any welder job descriptions. So now HR has to be involved. Oh, now that means we don't have any salary grades for welders. That means finance has to be involved. We don't know where we're going to put the welding equipment on the factory floor. So now the facilities environment has to be involved. I mean, on and on and on and on and on. There are these interfaces that Michael was talking about between the product side of the business and the business side of the business. And if we don't see those, we're going to have a lot of issues, and we'll continue to have issues. One of the strengths of the CM2 model, one of my all-time favorite elements within CM2 is the linkages that we talk about.
Okay.
Making sure that we have linkages of everything. We link items to create structures. We link items to data sets to create relationships. We link data sets to owners. We release primary data sets to subordinate or enabling data sets. We link tools and equipment. We link facilities. We link business processes. An organization that has great linkages has great visibility. And with that comes the ability to identify those areas that, hey, there's a soft spot. We can go beef that one up. But, I got to back up a second, though, because I meant to comment on something that Michael mentioned earlier that I thought was absolutely profound. And that is when an organization is in that quagmire of corrective action, when there is so much energy being spent as intervention resources, there's no energy left over to do improvements.
That's a good point.
That's huge.
Yeah, that is a good point. And so with IpX, with CM2, obviously you've shown right there that people who've gone through these programs who have allowed IpX to show them how to see all the different pieces of corrective action, the benefit it is. So where can people find or connect with you both to just pick your brain? And then where can people go to find out more about IpX, CM2, and corrective action?
They should do what I do, and that's call Ken.
Absolutely.
The best thing, of course, if anybody is familiar with CM2, they already have that. If you're not familiar with it and you want to be familiarized, go to our website. Go to ipxhq.com, and everything that you would like to know about us and our offerings and our certifications and our skill sets. By the way, and I say this in all honesty, it's going to sound like, oh yeah, right, you have to say that, but I don't say anything that I don't believe. And I have to tell you, Chris, in all of my years in industry and all the organizations that I've worked with and all the groups that I've been associated with, I have never had the privilege to be involved with such an amazing team of cross-functional expertise that we have at IpX. The team is, I'm blown away. I'm totally blown away. They're amazing. It's a great group, and I love working with them. And what's really cool is they love working with you. So any organization that would like some assistance in anything that they're trying to do, we can go from everything from just topic to topic support all the way up to full program management of a transformation project, everything in between. Awesome. And Michael is a classic example. He's one of our, he's a crackerjack dude, man. He's one of the best. So yeah, just go to the website. Everything you can see is there. You can contact, if you want to email me, Ken at IpXHQ.com. But yeah, and we're always there. We're always willing to help.
Perfect. Yeah, guys, definitely check it out. Get some good information there, and start really taking action to reduce your corrective actions in your organizations. And before we do say goodbye, though, just want to kind of end on a fun note, lighten the mood a little bit, especially with everything going on in the world. So we got a fun question for both of you, Ken and Michael. Who is your favorite band?
Wow. Well, Queen has to rank right up there. I just think they're incredible.
Favorite song by Queen?
Favorite. I have a favorite only because I know these guys. I was actually on a business trip to Germany a few years ago, and it was a Saturday afternoon. I was at the bar in the hotel having a beer, and this guy came in and sat down, and we struck up a conversation, and he turned out to be the lead guitarist and lead singer for Nazareth. They were doing a concert, and we just hit it off, and he invited me to join the band. So I rode with the band to the concert, got backstage passes, and so
wow.
they're not
You're a roadie
big
now.
name, but it was fun.
Nazareth, Hair of the Dog, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What about you, Michael?
Well, normally I'd have to go with the boss, Springsteen.
Yeah.
Today I'm looking out at 6+ inches of snow, so I'm going to go with Jimmy Buffett today.
Oh, there you go.
I love Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, those are some good choices. I'd agree with those. I was raised on the 80s, so I'm with the older stuff for sure. But well, guys, thank you so much for.
Wait, Chris. Oh. So who?
Oh, who? Man, that's a hard one because I have so many.
I know, me too.
AC/DC's been recently a lot of AC/DC and always the Beatles. I've just always enjoyed the Beatles. So
me too. Love the Beatles. I got all their albums.
Oh, nice.
I like Three Dog Night, by the way. Also.
Yeah, Three Dogs Night's good. So all those oldies and always goodies. So
that's right.
But well, guys, again, thank you so much for being on the IpX True North podcast to share about corrective action and how organizations can start kind of making a difference. It
was fun. Michael, you shout out your email, bud.
Michael at IpXHQ.com.
There you go.
Awesome. Great, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, man. Be good.
Thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe and review the show. And for more information on IpX, visit IpXHQ.com.